Have you ever stopped to think about what exists beyond death? What if someone said they saw Jesus face to face and received a dire warning about a nuclear war in the US? In today's video, you'll hear the shocking story of an atheist doctor who died for minutes and returned with an urgent message. Christians, prepare. He describes in detail visions of destruction, the spiritual forces behind human decisions, and the only way to avoid the worst. Don't miss out. Like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these real and prophetic accounts. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Let's spread this message to as many people as possible. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm an American, 43 years old, a trauma surgeon at a major Chicago hospital. I grew up in a Baptist home but abandoned my faith in college. For me, God became a placebo for the weak. I told myself, science is my temple, the scalpel is my gospel. I spent years opening bodies to stop bleeding, fix crushed bones, and pull out bullets. I saw so much death that I stopped feeling it. I became kind, cold, and efficient. The night it all happened, I was operating on a boy who'd been shot in a robbery. The blood was gushing out uncontrollably. Damn, another one. I made a morbid joke to the team. They laughed nervously. Deep down, I knew it was pure disregard for life, but that's how I operated. In the 10th hour of my shift, I felt something strange, a tightness in my chest. I ignored it. I pushed. I had no time for fuss. But then came a sharp pain, like a red-hot dagger. My hand trembled. I tried to continue. Suddenly, my ears closed in a monstrous ringing. The room spun. I fell on top of the patient. Screams. Hands dragged me. The last thing I saw were LED lights popping like fireworks, and then silence. An unearthly silence. It was as if someone had ripped out my human senses and thrown me out of my body. I saw the operating room from above, doctors trying to revive me, electric shocks to my chest, blood splattered. An intern cried as he performed compressions. My body was inert, pale, with my eyes half closed, and I was up there, hovering, conscious, lucid, but completely detached. I felt a cold wind pierce my soul. I looked back, there was no wall, just absolute emptiness. But something was pulling me. I began to float, as if the ground of reality had given way. I saw the entire hospital recede, the streets disappear beneath me, and suddenly, I was in a darkness so deep it swallowed me. The first sensation was pure terror. I, the skeptic, the scientist, screamed voicelessly, "No, this isn't real!" But there was no echo, only self-awareness. It was then that I felt a presence. I saw nothing, but I knew I was not alone. An indescribable whisper, colder than ice, enveloped me. "You built a kingdom with your own hands. Now see where it leads." I felt a million screams rising around me. I saw faces contorted in the darkness, crying, cursing, begging. One of them looked at me and shouted, "You let me die." It was the boy from surgery. I saw his chest, open and bloody. But it wasn't him. It was the living, breathing guilt. I trembled. I wanted to run away, but there was nowhere to go. The voice whispered again, "You wanted to be God. Now you face the abyss without him." The cold intensified until my conscience ached. I felt as if I were disintegrating. Suddenly, a light tore through the darkness like a flaming blade. It wasn't the sun. It wasn't electricity. It was something that saw me from within. And then I heard, "Daniel." My name sounded like a gentle but relentless thunder. It was more than sound. It was as if truth itself was calling me out of the darkness. When I heard my name, everything stopped. The darkness froze, as if afraid. That sound pierced me like liquid fire, burning away my pride, my excuses, my theories. I, the atheist doctor, was naked. No lab coat, no scalpel, no titles, just an exposed soul. The light before me pulsed with a life of its own. It wasn't just brightness, it was a conscious presence. And as it approached, I felt a crushing weight settle over my being. It wasn't hatred, it was holiness. Pure, terrible, irresistible. I wanted to run, but my legs were gone. I was thought, fear, memory. I saw every surgery I performed without compassion, every cruel joke in the morgue, every merciless decision on duty. It was as if I were operating on my soul myself, cutting to the bone, without anesthesia. The light continued to advance. The darkness around me dissolved into smoke, and in the center of it, I saw a figure. It wasn't a hologram. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a man clothed in light. His eyes paralyzed me. They didn't shine like lamps. It was like looking into truly infinite oceans. I saw in them everything I was, everything I denied, everything I pretended not to know. I cringed, or at least I felt myself cringing. My conscience screamed, "No! I don't want to see." But there was no way to close our eyes. He spoke again, but not with a voice. It was a sound within my very essence. "Daniel, you've always belonged to me." At that moment, something I didn't know existed in me broke. I began to tremble. I felt shame, a shame so pure it ripped me apart. I wanted to sink into the ground, but there was no ground. I said or thought, "I don't know you. I don't believe you." The presence didn't move away. On the contrary, it came closer, and I felt every spiritual molecule in me vibrate with fear and love at the same time. He reached out. It wasn't flesh. It was dense, living light. When he touched my shoulder, I felt neither heat nor cold, but something far more painful. Truth. Instantly, everything I'd hidden even from myself was revealed. Every secret lover, every lie to cover up medical errors, every disdain for the weak, every fight with my father as a teenager, spitting "God is dead" in his face. I fell, or felt myself falling, at his feet. There was no ground, but I was prostrate. I cried without tears. It was a cry of the soul. I writhed like a worm. I felt a flash explode inside me, as if every spiritual cell screamed for mercy. Then he said, "You rejected me, but I did not reject you. Get up." Those words rebuilt me. I found myself rising, not because I wanted to, but because his voice was an order to the universe. When I finally looked at him, I understood. Was Jesus, not a prophet, not a myth, not a cultural idea. It was him, real, infinite, ardent, the cause of everything, the judge and physician of souls. He looked at me with sadness and fire in his eyes, and I knew something was about to happen, something no scalpel in the world could fix. When I finally looked him in the eye, I realized there was no way I could lie. Before those eyes, all defenses crumbled. It was as if every argument I'd used to mock faith was a dry leaf, incinerated the moment he looked at me. I felt a horrible tightness in my spiritual chest, as if there were no air to breathe. And then I saw, not just memories, but profound truths. I saw the hospital where I worked, the bright, cold corridors, the cynical conversations about patients as products, the discussions about budget cuts that I silently accepted, as long as they didn't affect my salary. I saw bodies piled up in the waiting room during the pandemic, and my contempt for those who cried. Jesus didn't speak. He just let me see. My pride screamed, I saved lives. But a voice inside me, perhaps my conscience finally freed, retorted, but at what cost? Without love, without value, without truth. The pain was unbearable, but he didn't turn away. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The ground disappeared. The light around us transformed into a clearing suspended above Earth. I looked down and saw the planet, giant, blue, spinning slowly. Beside me, Jesus became even more radiant. I could hardly bear to look, but I couldn't look away. He reached out to the world, and he said, now in an audible, deep voice like thunder covered in tears, "Look." My heart stopped. I saw America. The cities lit up like electrical circuits, the roads like veins of light, people living, shopping, partying. But at the same time, I sensed something I'd never seen before, a pulsating darkness creeping like living oil over the cities. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Houston. The darkness twisted, monstrous. Faceless forms walked over the buildings. They whispered in the ears of politicians. They signed contracts. They manipulated the media. They entered homes like smoke. I heard the sound of voices, hatred, pride, fear, lust, greed. I saw gigantic, crowded churches, but many of them had a dull glow, as if they were just facades, and the darkness reveled in them, laughing with soundless laughter. I cringed. I felt like vomiting. I shouted, "What is that?" Jesus answered me with terrible sadness. The price of forgetting, the price of indifference. They built towers of power, but forgot the altar. Their hearts turned away. My spiritual legs gave out. I fell to my knees on the edge of that abyss. He pointed to a region on the map, Southern California. I saw families on the beach, children playing. And then, suddenly, a white flash like 1,000 suns. The nuclear mushroom rose slowly, majestic, horrible. I heard the wind, the heat, the screams. I saw the souls rising in flames. I fell to the ground from that vision, howling, "Make it stop!" But he just stared at me. "Look more." I obeyed. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't disobey that voice. I looked up, trembling, and saw the world map transform into a macabre platter. The borderlines flickered as if they were alive, pulsing red. On one side of the globe, I saw Beijing, a conference room. Generals stood silent, their faces as still as statues, but shadows snaked between them, whispering strategies. Their eyes flickered with codes. I saw Moscow. I saw Pyongyang. I saw Tehran. Everyone had maps spread out on tables, fingers tracing missile paths, while human faces showed nothing but cold calculation. And then I looked back at America. I saw war rooms, underground bunkers, American officers, senators, and generals gathered. But behind them, projected like colossal figures, were dark entities with teeth made of fire. They didn't scream. They whispered. Jesus said with a voice of contained thunder, "They think they're in control, but they're puppets." My heart stopped. I saw red knobs being turned, passwords being entered. I saw the chain of orders that could no longer be undone. In an instant, nuclear missiles appeared in silos, like monsters awakening with hunger. "See the price of pride," he said. I saw Washington being consumed by an explosion. I saw Houston, Dallas, Chicago, my city, incinerated in seconds. I saw the sky fill with atomic mushrooms like demonic flowers. Souls rose, screaming. Children burned. Mothers ran in flames. Old men prayed as they evaporated. "It looks," I screamed. My voice was a sob. "Please." But he didn't move. His eyes were shining with burning tears. "It is the fruit they sowed," he responded. Then the vision widened. I saw Europe trembling, sirens blaring in Berlin, Paris, Rome, missiles crossing the Atlantic, retaliations, counter-retaliations, and finally the planet as a cracked globe, covered in radioactive clouds, the atmosphere burning red. I saw the date float in the air, burning like embers. September 23rd, 2024. I sobbed. "Is this the future?" Jesus said, his voice so heavy that the universe seemed to tremble. "It is the point of no return, if nothing changes, if the hearts of men do not return." My spiritual insides churned. I couldn't speak. I just cried. He bent down to me. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I felt a rush of overwhelming love making me sob even harder. "You have to see everything." "I don't want," I screamed. "It needs," he said, and he lifted me effortlessly to show me something even worse. He lifted me up like a child, but there was no condescending caress. There was urgency. When my spiritual feet touched that solid nothingness, everything changed again. The earth vanished from view. I was in a vast, endless room, where the walls breathed shadows, black columns stretched into infinity. It was as if fear itself had been molded into architecture. I was trembling. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. In the center were thrones, not golden or jeweled thrones, but made of solid, dark smoke pulsing like an evil heart. Sitting on them were beings that could not be called human. They had no faces, only outlines like living mist, eyes red as burning coals. Each exuded a heavy presence, a cold intelligence. They didn't shout, they just whispered. And then I saw the horror. Around them, screens floated like open windows to the world. I saw parliamentary chambers, war rooms, diplomatic meetings, security councils, newspapers being printed, TV newscasts being recorded, viral posts being programmed, and those things, shaped every word, every fear, every justification. Jesus spoke without turning his face to me, as if he already knew I was going to collapse. "These are the thrones of darkness. They rule over pride, hatred, and lies." I choked. "They control everything. Not as you think," he said. "They don't force, they seduce." I saw a close-up of an emergency meeting of the U.S. Senate. A senator was pounding on the table, exasperated. "We must retaliate immediately." But behind him, I saw one of those beings whispering in his ear. I saw a general in Moscow typing codes, his hands trembling, while a shadow caressed his shoulders. I saw scientists justifying the design of new warheads as a moral necessity, laughing cynically, while spiritual currents snaked through their brains. "They don't scream, they whisper," said Jesus. "They say, it's for safety, it's for peace, for the future," and men believe it. I began to howl in disgust. It was as if I were vomiting my soul. Then I saw something worse. On one of the screens, I saw myself, in the operating room, making a joke while a boy lay dying on the table. Behind me, one of those things, huge, whispering, "You are God here. You decide who lives." My crying turned into hysterical sobbing. I wanted to tear myself apart. They were with me. I managed to stammer. "Try," said Jesus, with pain in his voice. "You heard them without knowing." Shame swallowed me like boiling mud. "That's why you're here," he continued. "To see, to understand, to choose." I trembled, naked, helpless. He didn't need to condemn me. I did that myself. And then he said something that pierced me. "You are not the only one. Every man hears voices. The question is which one he chooses to follow." I stood motionless, suffocated by the horror of it all. The voices of those beings still echoed in the room like a macabre chorus. More guns, more power, more fear, more control. I began to notice something terrible. Every time they whispered, dark threads would emerge from them and connect to the hearts of the men on the screens. Presidents, generals, journalists, businessmen, pastors. Yes, even pastors. What I saw tore me apart. Pulpits gleaming with applause and generous donations, but with dark chains attached to the preachers. They spoke of blessing, but without repentance, of victory, but without renunciation. I cried out to Jesus, "What about the churches? Don't they realize?" He looked at me. There was fire and sadness in his eyes. "Many are asleep. Some have sold out. Others have forgotten, but not all." At that moment, the darkness around me shook, as if a silent thunderclap had echoed through eternity. I saw cracks of light appear on the walls of that hellish room. The beings on the throne stirred. Some screamed soundlessly, others cowered, and through those cracks, I saw completely different scenes. I saw an elderly black man kneeling in a small rural church in Georgia, his hands raised, tears streaming down his face. I saw a Mexican mother in El Paso, praying quietly over her sick son. I saw a pastor in a New York basement meeting with 5 people who were fasting. I saw a group of young people in Alabama singing without instruments, just their bare voices. With each prayer, the crack in the darkness grew wider. "They know," said Jesus. "They sustain the world more than presidents." The demons writhed like worms on salt. They roared soundlessly. "They fear true prayer," he continued, "because they can't control it." Those images intensified. I saw old men, unheard, praying in tongues. I saw children murmuring, "Jesus, help," before falling asleep. I saw patients in hospitals with their eyes closed, smiling through the pain, connected to a light stronger than the radiation from 1,000 bombs. I saw golden threads coming out of them and weaving a luminous web over America, not over the summits of power, but over humble homes, shacks, small churches, secret rooms. "These threads are prayers," said Jesus. "They hold their wits." I cried like a baby. "So there is still hope." Jesus didn't smile, but his eyes shone. "Yes, but time is short." I shuddered. "Show me everything," I begged, despite my fear. "You need to see the end," he replied. And when he said that, I felt the ground give way again. I was sucked down, deeper than I ever imagined. The descent was a nightmare. There was no gravity, but an irresistible force pulled me downward. It was like being swallowed by a whirlpool of conscious darkness. I screamed, but there was no sound, only a dull vibration, an echo of panic. Jesus still held my hand. I felt the burning heat of his presence, but he didn't stop me from descending. When I finally stopped, I realized where I was. It was a vast, roofless hall, like an endless cavern of solid darkness. Flames rose from the floor in blue and black blazes, illuminating scenes of indescribable horror. Souls, thousands, millions, trapped in pits, bound by ethereal chains. Some screamed incessantly, Others muttered curses. Others merely babbled deliriously. I saw familiar faces. I saw people I admired on TV. I saw famous leaders. I even saw doctors like myself, all stripped of pretense, all masks ripped off. The atmosphere was thick with congealed hatred. Every spiritual breath burned my lungs with the smell of emotional sulfur, guilt, shame, contempt. Jesus stood beside me, motionless. His eyes shone like pure fire. I was trembling. I tried to hide my face, but there was nothing to cover me. "Why do you bring me here?" I cried. He didn't respond angrily. He just said, his voice like soft thunder, "For you to understand destiny without regret." I began to crawl backward, trying to escape the sight, but there was no escape. It was then that I realized something that chilled my soul. The chains that bound those people weren't driven into the ground. They came from within themselves, from their hearts, from their thoughts, as if they were extensions of their own corrupted desires. "They chained themselves," said Jesus. "Nobody arrested them?" I asked in horror. "They listened to the voices. They chose the lies." His words were sharp knives cutting through my apologies. Then I saw another scene, projected in the darkness like a living screen. Nuclear bombs falling on American cities. Mushrooms of fire lit up even the clouds. Children charred on playgrounds. Families trying to hug before turning to ash. I saw missiles launching from underground US bases. I saw retaliation against Moscow, Beijing, Tehran. I saw the leaders signing orders, trembling with fear, while the shadows behind them laughed. Jesus forced me to look. This is the fruit of unbridled hatred, of unrepentant pride, of religion without love. I sobbed breathlessly. "Please stop. I don't want to see anymore." He turned to me. The flames reflected in his eyes like weeping universes. "You need it, or you'll never understand the price." And then the scene changed again. The darkness parted like curtains ripped away. I was thrown. I didn't walk. I was thrown into a place so different that the shock made me scream. It was a high, luminous plateau, floating above the earth. From up there, I could see the planet spinning, but it wasn't the blue globe in satellite photos. It was a living, pulsating body. Its veins were highways. Its organs were cities, and it was sick. I saw tumors of darkness swelling over entire continents. And Jesus stood there, looking down at the world. He seemed larger than before, more terrible, more majestic. But there was no anger in his eyes. There was mourning. "Take a good look," he ordered. When I looked, I saw streaks of liquid darkness flowing over nations. It was like living oil, seeping into schools, courthouses, parliaments, churches. I saw men in suits signing papers that looked like bloody contracts. I saw children watching cartoons that spat poison into their souls. I shouted, "It's not their fault. They're just kids. And it is for them that I still hold my wits," he said, tears burning in his voice. Then I saw something terrible. Over America, specifically over Washington, D.C., a black throne appeared. Upon it sat an entity with human form, but made of smoke and dark lightning. His eyes were cold flames. He smiled. From his chest ran wires that connected to government buildings, banks, TV stations, and wealthy churches. Wherever the wires touched, corruption, scandals, and clever lies emerged. I was shaking so much I could barely think. "That is the prince of this age," said Jesus. "He rules with seduction and fear. Why doesn't the Lord destroy it?" I begged. Jesus breathed like someone carrying the weight of the cosmos. "Because many want it, and because I still hope." And then I saw something. On the West Coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco, lights shone like stars. They were prayers, simple, broken. A homeless woman, wrapped in blankets, saying, "Jesus, help me." I saw these prayers transform into arrows of light that cut through the darkness. But the darkness was dense. It advanced like a black tide. "Prayers still fight," said Jesus, "but there are few, and many have already given up." I began to sob. My spiritual body shook like a leaf in the wind. "Show me how to stop this," I begged. He didn't answer right away, but he placed his hand on my head. I felt a warmth that disarmed me. "You will see the power they despise." Suddenly, the entire planet was covered in golden threads. They were fragile like spider webs, but they shone with an indescribable light. These threads connected humble homes, dark prisons, hospitals, small rooms with worn carpets where people knelt in prayer. These are the sincere prayers, he said. They sustain the world. Darkness attacked these threads, trying to sever them. But where there were many, darkness broke. Where there were few, it dominated. Do you understand now? I could only stammer, try, but the worst was yet to come. As soon as I whispered, "Yes," he fixed me with a gaze that pierced my soul to its core. There was nothing left to hide. I was dust before him. "Then see what happens when those threads break," said Jesus. Suddenly, the golden light began to fade in several areas. I saw entire neighborhoods plunged into shadow. Churches turned into auditoriums devoid of power. Pastors preached to applause, but without a single thread of light connecting their words to heaven. Shadows crept into these places with soundless laughter, occupying pulpits, boardrooms, bank accounts. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. "They exchanged the altar for stages," said Jesus, with a voice like wounded thunder. "They trade fasting for marketing. They trade repentance for slogans." Then I saw a specific vision that destroyed me. An American megachurch with 10,000 people cheering as the pastor shouted promises of wealth. But spiritually, it was an empty hall, covered in black mold doors with demons dancing among the seats. I started screaming, "Enough, please!" Jesus did not move. "You need to see it." The scene changed. I saw the world map again, but now it was covered in black fungi that grew like cancer. Amidst this horror, a few tiny points of light flickered. Small prayer groups. Old men in rocking chairs with worn Bibles. Children clasped their hands before bed. "These are my remnants," said Jesus. "They are few, but they are the last wall." Then I saw the nuclear bombs again, but this time I saw what was happening behind the scenes spiritually. When the launch orders were given, shadows cheered. Ancient spirits clapped silently. I saw entities traveling alongside the missiles, like flies on a corpse. "War is spiritual," he said. "They think it's politics. It's pride. It's fear. It's hate." And I gave them another way. "Which way?" I screamed, desperate. He held out his hands, and from the center of them came beams of light so bright they blinded the shadows. "This is the way: repentance, prayer, sacrificial love, forgiveness." The darkness screamed. Demonic spirits retreated. "They fear this more than 1,000 warheads," said Jesus. I cried, sobbing like a child. "But they don't want to," I said. "They make fun of it." He nodded. "That's why you must see, to warn, to cry out, to wake those who sleep." At that moment, the visions converged on a single point, a date burning over the planet like a seal of fire, September 23rd, 2024. "It's the point of no return," he said. I groaned, throwing myself at his feet, grabbing his robe of light. "Is there time?" He looked at me, his eyes full of universes. "There still is, but it's short." When he said, "There is still time, but it is short," it sounded like the tolling of a funeral bell for the whole world. I cried, sobbing like I'd never done before, not even as a child. It was the cry of someone who's seen the end. I felt my spiritual chest rupture, as if something ancient and rotten had finally been released. "So what do I do?" I begged, my voice hoarse, broken. Jesus looked at me like a doctor looks at a terminally ill patient who still has a chance. A slim one, but a real one. His eyes shone with burning mercy. "I will show the power they despised," he said. Suddenly, the entire plateau vanished. The globe vanished. I was in complete darkness again, but it wasn't hell. It was a void waiting to be filled. Out of nowhere, tiny dots of light began to flicker. One here, another there, then dozens, hundreds, thousands. Each point was a person praying, but not mechanical prayers. They were cries from the heart, whispers between sobs, hoarse chants, confessions of secret sins. I saw a divorced American father praying in a dark room, asking for forgiveness for abandoning his children. I saw a teenage girl in Texas lying on the floor saying, "Jesus, I don't want to kill myself." I saw an elderly, sick woman in Florida moaning, "Save my family." And from each of these points came threads of pure gold, rising like flaming incense. These threads began to intertwine, forming a luminous web over entire continents. Where there were many, the darkness receded like a tide. Where there were few, it advanced. "This is the real war," said Jesus, and his voice filled everything. "Bombs kill bodies. These prayers save souls. Warheads destroy cities. These words change eternal destinies. I trembled. I saw the entities on the thrones of darkness howling, writhing. As this light touched them, they fled like rats. Jesus pointed me to a place, Washington D.C. A dark mass loomed over the Capitol, but from basements and small churches, I saw threads of light rising, defying the darkness. It is because of them that I still hope, he said. They are few, but they are my remnant. I saw California, a nuclear bomb exploding in view, but then the scene rewound like a movie in reverse. The explosion faded. The shadows receded. Everything cleared. What if they pray? What if they cry out? I asked, crying. Then I listen. Then I heal, he replied. But the world mocks at this, I said, without strength. That's why you saw, he replied. With a firmness that shattered my last apologies, he reached down and touched my forehead with a finger of light. I felt my mind catch fire with love and pain at the same time. Tell them, Christians, prepare yourselves. The time is now. There will be no other warning. His voice echoed like the sound of 1,000 choirs, like thunder and breeze at the same time. Everything began to shake. My vision shattered like breaking glass. I was sucked away. The last thing I heard before the absolute darkness was his voice shouting not in anger but with desperate urgency. Cry out before it's too late. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.